welcome back everybody. It looks like it's Friday. I wanted to let you know that there's some new stuff up on Blackboard. This practice test answer keys folder has your first practice test in there, and then over the weekend, probably Sunday or Monday, I will upload the answer key, and then you can check your answers. And then no class Monday, so when we come in on Tuesday, if we're not quite finished with Chapter 4, we will finish, and then you can ask me anything you want during the review. We'll have some clicker questions, and then whatever you want to do. Also, this online lectures folder, that is YouTube videos by an economist at Harvard. Her name is Jody Beggs, and she slows it down and she covers some of the topics that we're covering. And if you just want a different presentation of it, you might want to watch those videos. They're just there for your reference. I mean, you're not required to watch them or anything, but if you just want to maybe see it other than in class and in the book and whatever, you might want to watch that. Also, the homework assignment is due on Tuesday, and one very important announcement. I made some announcements yesterday. One of them was about your clicker points. If you're not getting clicker points in the grade book and you are clicking in, I need you to inform me now, because after the first test is gone, I'm not going to re-give you those points. It's just a pain to go in later and try to get the points. So check on your clicker points. But the most important announcement is that Chapter 4 will be on the first test. On the syllabus, I had an error. It said Chapters 1 through 3 and 7 and 8. But it's either way, one of the tests had to have 5 chapters and the other one had to have 6 chapters. So this way, putting Chapter 4 with Chapter 3 will make it a lot easier to study. So just know that. And I've updated the syllabus on here. So if you go here, the new syllabus says so as well. And I made an update. We're not going to do Chapter 12. We're going to do something called iPencil, and I will get that to you later on. I'll post it to Blackboard, make an announcement. We won't worry about that until after the test is gone. Okay, so yesterday we left off with a video about price gouging, right? And the guy that brought the generators down after Hurricane Katrina and talked about why economists like price gouging. They think that price gougers should be awarded a medal for keeping supplies available for everybody. And when the government tries to put these anti-price gouging laws into effect, what they're doing is making a price ceiling. And a price ceiling says that you cannot charge more than a certain price. Right? So, in effect, I think it was the Mississippi State Attorney General, he said something like, you're not allowed to increase your profits once a disaster strikes, right? So then that caps, the price ceiling is you can't charge anything higher than you were charging before. Sometimes we might set a different kind of price ceiling where we say, look, the ceiling is $5, you can't charge any more than $5. So it could be something like that. Now, sometimes these price ceilings might not matter. If we set the price ceiling above the market price, say that right now milk is like, what, $3.50, $4 a gallon. If we had a price ceiling that said you can't sell milk for more than $20 a gallon, it wouldn't matter, because we're not trying to sell milk for more than $20 a gallon right now.
There was something like a dozen murders in New York City last year over like the price ceiling of the rent control when people inherited it. Like, because if you inherit an like lease from somebody or somehow, then you get to keep the rent control that like they got from back in the 80s or whenever they got the apartment. And like landlords, there was a landlord that killed a couple people over it, I heard.
Huh, well, that's pretty crazy. Lilia?
Usually for price ceilings, is the wording like you can't increase profits, or you can't raise above a certain price?
All right. Normally, and what we're going to do in the book and in class here is I'm going to say, here's a price, you can't charge above that. And so I'll draw you a picture in just a second. But we're going to pick a price and say you can't charge above that price.
What I was thinking was that man from Connecticut. He had to spend money on gas. That was his time cost, his opportunity cost. And he wasn't really increasing profit, he was only doubling the price.
Right, he was doubling the price of the generators, and he certainly wasn't pocketing that whole difference. And I mean, if he had to sell them at the price he bought them for, he would lose a ton of money and time and everything else getting them there, and so he would have never gone, right? And as he said, he's never going again. So, right, so that's a price ceiling. Price floors are when they say that you cannot charge below a certain amount. right? And the price floor is binding when it's above the equilibrium price, because if we said that you can't charge below 10 cents a gallon for milk, well, nobody's trying to charge below 10 cents a gallon for milk. Right? It's already above that, so that's not binding, it doesn't matter. But if we said you can't charge below $20 a gallon for milk, well, we'll see what happens. That'll create surpluses. So I have some pictures to draw. So a binding price ceiling, right? So we start out, let's start out here. We've got our equilibrium price and quantity. Here's our equilibrium point. Okay, so if the price ceiling is binding, then it has to be set below the equilibrium price right here. So this is a ceiling. All right, here's the ceiling. Now, at this ceiling, what happens, all right, this is a binding ceiling because the market wants to be here. The market wants to go above this ceiling, right? But the ceiling says you can't charge any higher than this. So at this price, this is now the price that will be paid. And at that price, we can read off the supply curve, the quantity supplied. We can read off the demand curve and get the quantity demanded. And we can see that now people are demanding more at that price than producers are willing to supply. That creates a shortage. We call that a shortage. And if you wanted to find out how much of a shortage there is, you can see it graphically. It's this distance in here.
What's the middle one?
That's equilibrium quantity, QEQ. If you wanted numbers for the shortage, you can take the quantity demanded, say that maybe this is 100 units and this is 80 units, then the difference between there would be 20 units and you'd have a shortage of 20 units. Right? So does that make sense? So here's what would be the free market equilibrium price. But if you're not allowed to charge that price, right, then you're artificially constraining the price to be here at the ceiling.
Shortage again?
What's that?
You explain the shortage.
Okay, so there's a shortage because people want more of this thing than producers are willing and able to supply at that price. Okay, so when the price falls, you're increasing quantity demanded, but you're decreasing quantity supplied. So at equilibrium, we have quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. That's one of the conditions for equilibrium.
Is minimum wage a kind of price floor then?
Yes, we'll talk about minimum wage in just a bit. Yeah. Okay, so this is a binding price ceiling. Next, I'm going to show you a non-binding price ceiling. Okay, so here's our price, our equilibrium price and quantity. All right, so if this is our ceiling price up here, now they're saying, look, you can't charge above this price. But the market doesn't want to charge above that price. The market's happy right here. The market will stay in equilibrium. Right, so the point here is if you set your price ceiling above the equilibrium price, then it doesn't matter. Right? Maybe it would matter in the future if supply and demand conditions changed. Then it may keep you out of equilibrium. But right here in this market, this price ceiling is not effective. It doesn't really do anything because you're in equilibrium. You don't want to charge higher than this, so the price ceiling doesn't matter. As opposed to before with the binding price ceiling, when the ceiling was down here, the market wants to get to equilibrium. The market wants to go above the ceiling if it's set down below, and that's why it's called binding.
Sorry. So these price things evolve with interest rates?
I'm not sure what you just said. Do they evolve with interest rates?
Like, I mean, like, let's just say there's a law that's you can't charge more than $3 for gas, and obviously gas is less than $3. Let's just say that. And as interest rates go up, like the dollar becomes less valuable. Will the law evolve with that?
That's probably a political question. I mean, they could change. You could have a ceiling. You could have a ceiling be removed. Or you could have a new one imposed, and you could make adjustments to it if you were in charge of setting that price ceiling. If you had the authority to do that. And I'm not sure that it would necessarily track with interest rates, but it could be a possibility. Okay, so here's a story, and this is kind of like one of those things you could write for your essay. It's the economics is everywhere set up, and the story goes like this. So in Zimbabwe right now, they're having some economic troubles, and I don't know, the wise guys in the government decided to cut gas prices. Well, they called it cutting gas prices, but what they really did was established a price ceiling that was below the current market level. See how that works? So they've given priority to certain vehicles to get gas ahead of other vehicles, and the number one most prioritized vehicle is a hearse. Right? They don't want people like running late for their own funeral. So they give hearses gas. Well, a couple enterprising guys were arrested, and I think this was a common practice, but these guys got busted because they were leasing out the hearse to people. They'd throw a body in the hearse, give them to people to go take to the gas station to fill up with gas, because they had priority. They could like skip the line ahead of everybody else. They get gas in the hearse, take it back to the morgue or the funeral home or whatever, and then they'd unload the body, they'd give the body to somebody else, and he'd take that same body to go get gas. And then they would siphon the gas out of the hearse into their own car. And I don't know if you guys have ever siphoned gas, but it's not fun. And especially, like, you just don't get that gas taste out of your mouth. Right? So there are other costs involved with doing this, and with getting gas this way. Right? So these guys found a profit opportunity. They're trying to get around this price ceiling, right? The market will create ways for people to get things that they want, right? And these guys, now the people who are going to buy gas, they're paying a lower price for the gasoline, but they've got to pay these guys who leased them the hearse, and then they have to incur the cost of driving to and back from the gas station and siphoning it into their car. So like their costs might even be higher than when they had to pay a higher price at the pump. Right? So anyway, point that out. So that's something like that. If you were to encounter something like that in your life, that would make for a pretty interesting essay. I know we have some people who've lived outside the United States in this class, and maybe some fun, interesting foreign stuff would be cool for me to read. All right. So speaking of price controls, here's a video.
Called every realtor in the entire city. That's the thing else that I saw. It's horrible. It doesn't even have to say.
Control.
When we lived in New York.
All right. Anybody in here been hurt by rent control? Dylan?
Well, I mean, when I first moved in to where all the football guys lived, they gave us like a discounted rate because it was like where everybody lived at.
Okay. Wait. So you play for Florida State?
Yeah.
Okay. So Florida State was giving you a lower rate, but they were probably picking up the tab, or was it on university property or something?
I don't know how it worked, but I'm pretty sure they weren't paying the extra.
It's legacy, right?
Yeah.
Do you know how that works?
I have no idea. I just know they don't.
Okay, that's cool. I would imagine that either they own it and they let you stay there for cheaper is one way to encourage you to come and play here instead of going somewhere else.
Yeah.
Or
I think it was like they have like a contract that in like a couple of years they're going to buy the whole building.
Yeah, I feel like it's through athletics.
yeah, so that sounds like maybe they're not allowed to give you a paycheck to play for them, right? But there's these other benefits that they can maybe throw your way to make you decide that Florida State's a good place to come hang out and play ball. Right? Okay. So rent control is a really famous example of price ceilings, and it's happened in a lot of big cities. It's probably happened in some smaller cities, and the video, I think, highlighted a lot of the effects. There's these unintended consequences that people who don't need the rent control get benefits from it. And also, I'm pretty sure that the destruction of rental property is an unintended consequence, right? So the politicians had these good intentions. We're going to let people live somewhere and make it affordable for them. But what they've ended up doing is when they decrease the supply of housing, right? I mean, supply shifts to the left. That would make stuff more expensive in the free market. And also, with the quality deterioration, that one lady said she was looking at a place to live that doesn't have a sink. That's pretty crazy. But if landlords aren't getting the return on their money, they're not going to build apartment complexes. Maybe I want to build a building, I'll make a business building instead of a housing building, or something like that. So it discourages people from investing in new housing. It also leads to inefficient use of housing space, right? You're not going to build new stuff. And then the non-price methods of rationing occur. So the one couple was talking about how you can bribe a real estate agent to let you in. I mean, well, that's like paying more than the price ceiling, kind of like in the free market. And I don't know if that's a one-time bribe or if it's an ongoing bribe or he'll get you kicked out or however that works. Also, if I'm a landlord, maybe I decide that I only want athletes to live in my building, or maybe I only want college students to live in my building, or whatever. So I can pick who I let live in my building, and maybe like I don't like old people, right? So I don't let old people live there. I can pick, because there's so many people who want to live there. I can discriminate based on whatever I want to. I just can't tell them that they can't live there because they're old or because they have a child or something like that. All right, so there are other ways that because we always have to ration goods, right? And so this is kind of like waiting in line or buying favoritism. All right.
Like this in New York City?
What's that?
The rent controls is still in New York.
I believe there still are rent controls in New York City. I'm not 100% sure. All right, so when people can't get the things that they want because there are price controls on them, they might go underground, right? And maybe paying the real estate broker to get you in ahead of everybody else, that's not exactly legal. There's some other things that are a little bit more illegal, and like drugs and prostitution, and in this country the market for human organs. And black markets develop. And a black market is just a market that is not protected by the legal system in the country that it's in. So we saw the generators thing, right? And generators are normally just a regular good on the shelf, but I guess when you take them down to a hurricane-ravaged area and you try to sell them for more than it's worth, that's not allowed. And if people are doing that, then they're breaking the law. So that makes it a black market. And drugs and prostitution, they're outlawed. So a problem with that is, as we talked about before with drugs, you can't call the cops and say, hey man, I was doing this drug deal and somebody ripped off my cocaine. Because then you're in trouble because you were selling cocaine. So since you can't call the cops and you don't have access to the court system, that's why you got to go and bust a cap on that guy and teach him not to do it again, right? So you end up settling disputes with violence instead of going through the legal system. Maybe you pay that one gangster we were talking about $10 to $25 to cut him on the cheek or something, let him know not to do it again. All right. Also, quality is not uniform, right? You might not, so with prostitution out, not in Las Vegas, but in the surrounding area, the Bunny Ranch, they've got girls there who get tested all the time, right? They're of a certain caliber. I imagine they have skills that they need to demonstrate before they get their job. Whereas in a less regulated place where it's not legal, right, and you have street prostitutes, you don't know what kind of diseases they're carrying. Maybe you don't know if she's going to cut you and take your money instead of just doing what you wanted and charging whatever price you agreed on. And I mean, what do you do if a prostitute beats you up and takes your money? You can't call the cops and say, hey, I hired this prostitute and then she ripped me off. You can't do that, right? And so you don't have uniform quality, and so these problems in black markets serve to highlight the successes of the free market that's in an environment where property rights are well defined and enforced, and you have access to a legal system. Right? Okay, so still on price ceilings, another phenomenon you might be familiar with is ticket scalping, which I just view as paying somebody to stand in line for me. But you could say, well, look, the most you can charge for a ticket is whatever 10% more than the box office charged. I think around here it's something like that. So you can charge just a little bit more than you got the ticket for, but you can't double the price.
Why is StubHub and all that stuff legal?
All right, I don't know. That's an internet thing, and maybe it has to do with the transaction happening on the internet, or I don't know how that StubHub stuff works. But hopefully it's a way to get around ticket scalping laws, because the market wants, people want tickets. They're willing to pay this higher price. Nobody's forcing them to buy the tickets at the higher price. They could just not go to the event, right? So it's a mutually beneficial transaction, and I don't see what the problem is. So StubHub should be good.
Individuals that could just buy all the tickets and then could raise the price to where regular people couldn't afford it. That's the issue.
So
issue again.
So wealthy people want to buy all the tickets and then
To make profit.
well, sure, but in that case, what should happen?
You have X number, so some people will be able to buy the tickets, but those people, the same as those generators, the same number of generators exist, the same number of people will be able to buy them. It'll be the people with the means to buy them,
Well,
not whoever gets there first and has prepared to buy it.
Well, it could be. So in one case, the venue could charge a higher price initially, right? If the venue would charge the price that the ticket scalpers were charging, well, they probably wouldn't sell out. But then they could reap all that profit. And if they didn't, if wealthy people really just wanted to go to this event, poor people could benefit. Poor people could buy it at the box office price and then turn around and scalp them to the rich people, right? So it's probably going to work that way, because rich people don't have the time to wait around for a ticket. They would rather pay somebody to get the ticket for them than take the time out of their busy schedule. They have high opportunity costs, and they'd rather not wait in line to get the ticket. So that could end up benefiting poor people, and maybe the poor people can't buy 100 tickets at a time. Maybe they can only buy 10. But if you buy 10 this week and you turn a good profit, you can buy 15 next week, and then you can just keep expanding and scalping them to rich people.
Does this happen a lot? I feel like there's bigger problems in the world than that.
Oh, yeah, and I don't think that this is really a problem at all. Ticket scalping should be legal, and yeah, I think we should focus our attention on bigger issues. Frankie?
I was going to say, in Florida, you are allowed to buy a ticket and sell it. You have to sell it for the price that the venue is selling it for, and you can't sell it inside the venue area.
Oh, right, yeah, so yeah, you'll see guys standing around just on the other side of the street, and they're like, oh, hey, tickets, and it's weird. I've seen they do things, they hold up a sign that says, we buy tickets.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, so they're not saying, hey, we don't sell, we're not advertising that we sell tickets, right? But those people that buy tickets, they're not going to the game. They don't need 20 tickets to get into the game.
Isn't StubHub like the middleman though?
StubHub is a middleman.
Like you don't have to wait in line because...
Yeah, they lower your transaction costs of getting the tickets. They provide a valuable service, and that's why they're able to stay in business.
I had talking about quality, not uniform. I bought some scalp tickets one time for way more. Went up to the scanner.
Didn't scan in.
They were already used.
See, and yeah, that's a problem. See, if this were legal, they could have some kind of stamp of approval. Like Ticket Scalpers United or whatever, and you see they've got the logo or whatever. They're part of the group that scalps legit tickets. You're not going to get ripped off if you go to these guys, and if you are, you come back and you're like, hey, you sold me a bad ticket. They're like, oh, I'm sorry. Here, have another one on us, right? But what did you do in that case? You got to the game. You're like, oh, I can't get in. That sucks. I assume it was a game. Maybe it was a concert or something.
My girlfriend and walked in.
All right. Well, do you have something?
200 people. I mean, I don't think they're scared that much.
I was just thinking that, like, it's probably illegal because it takes away from the artist or the, whatever you're going to see.
Well, how does it take away from the artist? Because the artist sold that ticket initially, like at the price that the venue wanted. They sold that ticket. That ticket has been sold. Somebody was going to sit in the seat.
That's true.
Okay. So those are price ceilings. Now let's talk about price floors. Okay, so here's a graph. We got the market, and it's starting out in equilibrium. So we have our equilibrium quantity. And we have our equilibrium price. Right, so price floor says you can't charge beneath a certain amount. So if we draw our price floor down here, right, so this is... So here's a non-binding price floor. It's below the equilibrium price. They say you can't charge below this. Can't be down here. Well, that's okay because we're not. The market wants to be here. But if we set a price floor that's above the equilibrium price, then it is a binding price floor. And at this new higher price, higher price means quantity demanded is going to fall. It also means that quantity supplied is going to increase. So now we have a higher quantity supplied than people are demanding, and that creates what we call a surplus. You might also hear it called excess supply. I didn't mention before that in our shortage case, you might hear that referred to as excess demand. Right, if we wanted to calculate how big is the surplus is now going to equal this quantity supplied minus the quantity demanded. That'll tell you how many units are we short. Okay, so notice that these lines aren't going through the non-binding line. I mean, we're not trying to get here this would be quantity demanded at that non-binding area. So just make sure that you know that these quantities correspond to the binding price floor. Nothing happens. When this is non-binding, that means that the market is in equilibrium. Market stays in equilibrium. Is everybody good with that?
For the non-binding price ceiling, it stays at equilibrium also.
Right, yeah, so if it's non-binding, for both price floors and price ceilings, if they're non-binding, then the market will stay in equilibrium. Right, and they're non-binding, you can think about it as if like they don't matter. Right, so this price floor right here, we're saying you can't charge less than this. Well, it doesn't matter because the market's not trying to charge less than that. Does that make sense? And the opposite for the price ceiling. Okay, so Lily had mentioned minimum wage earlier, right? Minimum wage is a price floor. It says, look, you cannot charge below this amount of money for your labor. Right? Like, I can't go to somebody and say, hey, let me work for you for $5 an hour. I mean, if we do, then he's got to pay me under the table, and it can't come out. We're in kind of a black market setting, and that's no good. He could get in trouble for that. All right, so we saw that a price floor, a binding price floor, will cause a shortage. Right, so in the labor market, what's happening? A shortage means that there are more people who want to work than people who are willing to hire them, right? Because in the labor market, you supply labor, and companies demand your labor. Okay, so it's kind of weird to think about, but the worker is the supplier in the labor market. Right. So at this higher wage, companies cut back. They're not willing to hire as many people. And so the people who keep their jobs are better off because now they're getting a higher wage, although maybe their boss cuts back their hours or something so that they don't have to pay them as much money. Or in the case, some companies have been accused of making their workers clock out but continue to work or something like that. And that's one way that they're trying to get back closer to the market outcome. And one thing to point out is you'll hear people who are like, oh yeah, I'm making more money now because of minimum wage. And that's great, minimum wage is a good thing. But the people who have lost their jobs because of minimum wage, or they might not even know it, they might have applied somewhere, and the boss would say, you know, I would hire this guy if I could pay him $4 an hour, but I'm not going to hire him at, what's the Florida minimum wage? Like $7.67. Okay, I thought it was $7.16. Okay, so I'm not going to hire him for $7.67 an hour. So this guy doesn't even know that he lost a job because of the minimum wage. But he might just think, well, whatever, I wasn't qualified. Okay. All right. The next part of the chapter is on taxes. All right, so that we just did the price floor, price ceiling stuff. Taxes up next. And there's a couple different ways you can do taxes. You can either make it a percentage of something. You're used to that, like with the sales tax. In Leon County, you go somewhere, you got to pay 7.5% of the value of the stuff you buy, and that's sales tax. What we're going to do in this class is talk about per unit taxes, right? So we say every time you sell a pack of cigarettes, we're going to tack $1 tax onto each pack, or whatever, right? So each time you sell one pack, it doesn't matter what price you're charging, you just have to have $1's worth of tax in there. Okay. And with taxes, they have to be set up somehow. The law has to say who's going to pay the tax, right? And that's called the statutory incidence. Well, statutory meaning like coming from the statutes, and incidence meaning where it happens. So they can either say that the seller has to pay the tax or that the buyer has to pay the tax. Right? So with the sales tax, they say that the buyer has to pay it, right? So the seller has a certain price tag, they keep their money, and then you pay the extra tax on top of that. But would it be any different if they said, you know what, retailers have to pay the sales tax? Anybody think that we'd get better prices, Adam?
They just raise the price of the goods.
Exactly. All right. So it doesn't matter whether the law says that buyers or sellers have to pay the tax. We'll see that it actually depends on who's more elastic. All right. And let's see. A couple other definitions down there: tax rate and tax base. Okay. Tax base is how many units are we going to tax, or what is the value of the stuff that we are taxing. Okay, so if we say that there's a tax on sellers, right, what's that going to do to the supply curve? Okay, so supply is going to shift to the left. All right, let me start out here with just drawing our initial equilibrium point here. So this is where we start out. I'm going to call this QNT for no tax. P no tax. Okay, and so we said supply is going to shift to the left. All right, I'll call this supply with the tax. Right, so here's our new quantity. This is our quantity with the tax. Right, so because supply shifted to the left, price is going to increase. It's a change in supply, but a change in quantity demanded. And I'm going to call this price the price that buyers pay. All right, so they go to the market and they pay this price. Well, what's it cost to produce? How much money do sellers get to keep? Well, you find that at this quantity right here, here's the cost of production. We read this off the supply curve. At that quantity, we can find the price that sellers keep. Right? So the difference between the amount that buyers pay. Oh.
Does it say sellers pay?
No, it says sellers keep. So buyers go to the store, they put some money down on the counter. Sellers have to take and give the tax to the government, and then they get to keep the rest. Okay, so this height right here, all the way there, that is the tax. Right, so the amount of the tax is this much money. And if you'll notice, the supply curve has shifted up by the amount of the tax. Right, and I think it was yesterday we were talking about cost curves, and when you increase costs, you're going to end up shifting a curve up, and you can think about this as, if you want, this amount right here is also the amount of the tax. So that's how high up you have to shift the supply curve, and it'll just so happen that it's also the difference right here. Now, one property of taxes, you'll notice that we cut back the quantity that transacts under the tax is less than the quantity without the tax. Sebastian?
You said we're not going to deal with like percentage taxes?
No, this is just this is a per unit tax. This says because down here it says just add this much to, and it's not changing depending on the current price of the thing that we're selling.
So my question would be like the 7% tax in Florida on practically everything we buy is like
it's 6% statewide.
Oh, sorry, I'm from Pinellas County. We have Penny for Pinellas.
Yes.
The 6% tax, like, it doesn't really. I mean, does it really make that significant of a difference that would be visible on a graph like this?
You can think about the percentage taxes in the same way that you think about these taxes, right? So going through the process of what will happen with the tax will be fine. You might come out with just slightly different numbers if it was a percentage tax thing. So because not as many units transact, look at this. This right here, without the tax, this used to be consumer surplus. Right? We had people who were willing to pay this much, they only had to pay this much, they got that surplus, right? Then this triangle down here, this used to be producer surplus. So we had people who were willing to supply this unit for this much money, they get to charge this much money, they get surplus. But now, these producers and consumers do not get that surplus because they're not trading those units. And we call that deadweight loss.
Because of the tax?
Right, this is caused by the tax. Because of the tax, when supply shifted back here, our new quantity is this quantity at the tax, and we're not trading these units that would have traded without the tax.
Wait, there's a tax on like the seller?
Okay, so this is a statutory incidence on the seller. So what I'm saying is that because the tax is on the sellers, that's going to shift the supply curve to the left. Okay. Right, and then that's how we get to all the rest of this. Okay, so here's some deadweight loss. And now I know there's a ton of information in this graph, right? We'll see something again. We'll do this a little bit more. Okay. Okay. Now, if you'll notice, we're selling. So here's 0. We're selling Q units under the tax, and each unit has to pay the tax. So the tax revenue, how much money is generated by this tax, is equal to the tax rate times the quantity that transacts under the tax. And if you remember the area of a rectangle, well, look, the height of this rectangle here is the tax. The length of this rectangle is the quantity that we're consuming. So if we were to take the area of this rectangle, we could get the tax revenue. All right, so that's how much money will be raised from this tax. But we might also be curious how much of that is being paid by buyers and how much of it is being paid by sellers. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this old equilibrium price with no tax as our baseline, right? We're saying without the tax, this would have been the price. Now buyers have to pay this much extra, so this whole area right here, all the way down here, is the amount that buyers pay. Whoa.
So anything above the price when there's no tax?
Right. Right, because at the margin, that's how much extra they're paying because of this tax. Does that make sense? So because the buyers have to pay that much extra, that's the portion of the tax that we say that they pay.
Why did the supply curve shift to the left?
Because we said that the sellers have to pay a tax, right? And that's one of the supply curve shifters. You're increasing their costs by making them pay the tax. Okay. Now, if we were to come down here, I'm going to do this, I guess, in blue. All right, this area down here, you can probably guess, is the tax that is paid by the sellers. Okay, so you can see when you add up the taxes paid by the buyers and the taxes paid by the sellers, you get the total tax revenue. All right. Does everybody have that copied down? Fun stuff. Okay. Well, we could also have a tax on buyers. If we did that, what would happen? All right. Right. So demand would shift left. All right, because not getting as much enjoyment out of this stuff because I hate paying taxes. All right, so here's D with the tax. All right, here's our quantity with no tax. Here's our price with no tax. And now what happens? So here we have our demand curve intersects the supply curve here. Demand fell, so the supply dropped, but we have a change in quantity supplied. We have a change in demand. So here's our quantity with the tax. So you can see that just like if we had imposed the tax on the sellers, we end up with the lower quantity here. At this quantity, buyers value that marginal unit at this price that we read off the demand curve. I'm just going to abbreviate this one, price that buyers pay with a BP. And then what's it cost to produce? Well, at this quantity, we can read off the supply curve. So that cost is going to be, this is the price that sellers keep. Okay, so sellers get to keep that much money, and the difference between the price that buyers pay and the price that sellers keep, all the way in here, this is the amount of the tax. And it's also the amount that you shifted the demand curve down. You could see, so this amount between here and here, but this should be a parallel shift. This demand curve should be parallel to that demand curve. I'm just not great at drawing stuff. Same thing when we shifted the supply curve, they should be parallel. All right, so this is down by the amount of the tax. And just like before, you can see that we have this deadweight loss because we have these units over here between the quantity that are transacting with the tax right now versus what we would have had without the tax. All right, so this triangle is the deadweight loss. This is the lost consumer surplus. This is the lost producer surplus. It's looking a lot alike. And in fact, this rectangle in here is the taxes paid by buyers.
test, are we going to have to draw something like this whole thing out, or are you going to have it ask questions to us about it?
Okay, I'm glad you asked that. On this next test coming up, I'm not going to have you do this. This is kind of complicated stuff, and we don't have much time before the test, but this will be a fair game question on the final.
Like, draw this.
Yeah, I could say, suppose that there's a statutory incidence of 20 cents a gallon on milk, and show what happens to this stuff, and show.
Have this up and ask questions about it. Or
but yeah, on this test, if I ask you a question like this, it would be something like maybe identify how much of the tax is paid by buyers, and you'd say, oh, it's that little red square there.
Got it.
It wouldn't have the label on the inside. All right. Isaiah?
You said statutory, then you like to note who it had been assigned to, right? Because it would have to shift one.
Exactly. Or what's more likely, what we'll probably just do is, it turns out that it doesn't matter what the statutory incidence is. And there's a point I was going to get to in a minute, but it doesn't matter if you shift the supply curve or the demand curve, you'll get the same answer. You'll get the same reduction in quantity, you'll get the same on how much do buyers pay versus how much do sellers pay. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is just pick a curve that you feel comfortable with and shift it. I like to shift the supply curve to look at taxes, and you can do the analysis the same way with either supply or demand. So I will, if I ask you a question asking you to draw me a tax, which will probably happen on the final, but it will not happen on this first test. Then you'll be free to pick whether you want to shift supply or demand, whichever one you're more comfortable with. All right, so this is taxes sellers pay. So you'll notice that this graph is basically identical to when there was the tax on the sellers. We still have the buyers paying their taxes up in this box, we have the sellers in this box, and we have this deadweight loss here. Now let me also note that this tax now, buyers are paying this tax, they're not getting that in surplus, right? If you wanted to look at consumer surplus, now this triangle right here is our consumer surplus, and this triangle here, this is our producer surplus, right? But
I thought the deadweight loss was the surplus.
No, deadweight loss it used to be surplus. It was surplus before the tax, right? Because we were transacting this many units.
In the last graph, those two triangles on the top and bottom were also the surplus. You just didn't label them.
Right, yeah. In the other graph, they weren't labeled. So here, I'm going to make the point that this, when you have to pay taxes, you lose surplus, right? Because you're basically taking the money, however much you valued it, and now you've got to give that money to the government. So it's no longer a surplus in your pocket, but it's just a transfer. And so that's not so terrible. Like, it just goes from one person to another person. There's still value created from the trade. It's just now, like, some of it's got to switch hands. But this deadweight loss stuff over here, that's no good because, that's surplus that's now it's just not happening. So this value is being created because these units are being traded, but we're not getting any value out of this over here. Dan?
Isn't the bottom triangle consumer surplus?
No, the bottom one is producer surplus. Producer surplus, what we said before was that it was the amount in excess of the cost of producing something, right? So this supplier would be willing to supply this unit for this much, and now he gets to keep this much. So that's the surplus amount. If it were the old market price, he would have had this much extra, right, up to here. Sebastian?
That's what my next question was going to be, was let's say that this is like a small tax, like a couple of cents, like the 6 cents in Florida. If you put a dot, like, it's not like you owe, like, all the consumer and the buyer, according to those last two graphs, lose all their surplus always. It's, you can put that dot, like, lower there and then a higher one there. They still end up just losing some of their surplus. But,
I'm glad you said that.
Right.
Okay. Does everybody have this copied down? By the way, it's also in your textbook. Okay, so what I'm going to, I think you lead into my next question. Okay, I'll draw you a picture in just a second, and we'll see where I put the dot, right? That's what you want, is where the dot goes. Okay, so deadweight loss, let's see, what else? Okay, so deadweight loss is something that keeps us from being economically efficient, right? So in order to be efficient, we have to transact all the goods for which there's a surplus and no goods for which they cost more to produce than people value them, right? So taxes keep us away from economic efficiency. They create the deadweight loss, and because of that, the deadweight loss is created by people who would have bought it for the market price and sellers who would have produced it at the market price, but now that they can't get that market price, they just drop out of the market. Right, so now, I think this is the where the dot goes. If it's not, then ask me after I draw this, cool? Okay, so what really matters in how much do the buyers pay versus how much do the sellers pay is it depends on who is more elastic. So I'm going to try to draw you a picture. All right, so bear with me. We're going to draw this. I'm going to get a straight line drawer.
Wait, so, sorry, the deadweight loss, that's people that just don't buy it anymore?
Right, it's because those units are not being traded anymore. So, so there is no surplus, right? It's kind of like if I would have cut some people out of the candy trading game in class, where you could have traded for a better piece of candy if I'd let you trade, but now I say something like, there's a tax, you have to pay me 10 cents if you want to trade your candy, and you're like, well, I'm just not going to do it.
Isn't it lost revenue because it's the area of price times quantity? So it would be
right.
Number of units, and that would be,
all right.
It would be money.
Okay, well, what do you mean by lost revenue? So we can go back here.
It's like transactions that aren't happening, money that's not changing hands.
Right, okay, so here, let me draw on a clean sheet of paper. All right, so if we have, just take the price, the quantity,
like the
supply and demand.
And the supplier is not receiving it.
All right, so here's supply, demand, make sure everything gets labeled. I know you got to do it 1,000 times, but just label everything. Okay, so here's the quantity, and here's the price. And so what you're saying is that revenue generated from sales of this stuff is all this whole area right here, right? Everything in this rectangle right here, yeah? Right, so in the free market, this is the revenue that's generated by selling this quantity, right? You sell this quantity, and every unit sells for this price P, so P times Q, so this is revenue.
Yeah, but those ones that are past, isn't it contained by that triangle, like the ones past?
Okay, so now what you're saying is that now we have something. Now when we have this tax here, so price, quantity, demand, this is no tax, here's supply with tax, all right, this is quantity with the tax, here's the quantity without the tax. Okay, so what's happened is now the total amount spent is the area of this rectangle, right? So this is the price that buyers pay. Right, so this rectangle right here would be the amount of money spent on the good. But this box in here is tax revenue. Right, because this is the amount of the tax and this is the quantity that was transacted. And then this amount down here is the revenue to sellers. All right, because this is the price that sellers keep. So sellers keep this much money, and they do it for this many units. Right. So before, you can see that the seller revenue was greater. I mean, even if we were only transacting this many units, the seller revenue would have been greater here, and they would have made even more money off of these units as well. Did that answer your question?
I was just basically saying that it's like money that neither the seller didn't receive and the buyer didn't spend. So it was like lost out of the economy.
Right. And what we don't really care so much about the money didn't happen. What the bad thing about that deadweight loss is that now the surplus is gone. All right, so this amount of surplus is gone. Like if buyers don't spend money on something, then they still have that money in their pocket to spend on something else. And the problem is there was an opportunity here for them to get surplus, for them to create value, and that's been lost. Okay. So now we're going to go to the tax incidence. What if supply is really inelastic and demand is elastic? So I'm going to use this straight line thing to help me draw. All right, so there's our price and quantity axes. Okay, supply is inelastic, so I'm going to make it really steep. It's still upward sloping, but I'm going to make it pretty steep to help illustrate my point. And demand is elastic. It's still going to be downward sloping, but I'm going to make it really flat to help illustrate my point. Something like that. All right, so here's our supply, no tax. Here's demand. I'm going to shift the supply curve because that's what I like doing better. Remember, we'll get the same results if we were to shift the demand curve. Here's our quantity with no tax. Here's our price with no tax. Okay, and now, say we have a tax that's going to be on sellers, so we have to shift the supply curve. These are pretty close to parallel. Here's supply with the tax. It's shifted this direction. Okay, now where this supply curve intersects demand now, that's the new price. That's the price that buyers pay. Oh boy, all right. And, oh man, I drew this kind of messed up. I shifted it too far. Sorry guys, I'm going to go back and, I need that to intersect the old supply curve so we can see how much it costs for everything. So I'm just going to shift it a little bit farther to the right. It might still work out on your screen. There we go. All right, let me just not shift it quite as far. Sorry, technical difficulties.
You make your first supply curve just a little more.
Yeah, a little more elastic. I'm not sure. I have to go back and erase a lot more steps to do that. So, all right. So this is over there. I'm just gonna kind of draw it like this. There. Now that's the quantity with the tax. All right. That's what it costs to produce. So from the old supply curve, we can see the price that sellers keep. From the new intersection with the demand curve, we can see the price that buyers pay. Okay, so now, here's our deadweight loss, right? Because this triangle here. Okay, so here's the lost consumer surplus right up here. Here's the lost producer surplus right up here. This triangle, by the way, deadweight loss is always shaped like a triangle. That might help you find it on a graph. Okay, but now, look at this. This is the amount, this area right here is the tax revenue from buyers. And then this right here, all of this stuff is the tax revenue from sellers. So what you can see is that visually here, this blue area is a lot smaller than the red area, right? So buyers are paying a lot less of this tax than sellers are. And why is that? It's because they're more elastic, right? If they're more elastic, they've got more alternatives, they can go elsewhere. They're not going to deal with the price increase so much, but sellers are inelastic and they kind of have to take it, so they end up paying a lot more of the tax. And once again, it doesn't matter statutorily whatever the law says who has to pay it. Sellers, in this case, are going to end up paying more of the tax. If I had shifted the demand curve instead, we would end up with the same result.
Trying to sell it back. Or let's say I get a car and I put like 1,000 bumper stickers on it and I paint the most ridiculous things on it. I mean, how much is my resale value going to be? Not much. So that's why people don't really do that, right? Because when they think about going to resell it, the value decreases a lot. You know, if you're not really